Hello everybody and welcome back to another writing vlog. In this vlog, I'm going to be working on the sequel to my novel. I sold my debut historical mystery, The Cloak and Dagger Club, to Berkley in a 2-book deal. And that means I need to write a sequel to The Cloak and Dagger Club. That's what I'm going to be doing in this vlog. The Cloak and Dagger Club is my 1930s set historical mystery inspired by Agatha Christie and the Detection Club. I will link the book deal announcement video in the card if you haven't watched it yet. I got the synopsis for book 2 formally approved by my editor earlier this week, which means I can really start working on it in earnest. Technically, I wasn't supposed to start writing it before my editor approved, but I did have to wait a long time for the contract, so I did start working on it anyway, and I've written around 27,000 words so far. But now that she has approved the idea, I am going to hit the ground running and start devoting more time to working on the sequel. And that's what this vlog is going to be all about. One of the things that I want to do is make sure that I have my timeline for the murders straight. Yes, murders. This book does have multiple murders in it. I believe the Cloak and Dagger Club only has one, but this one has a few. And one piece of feedback that I received from my agent, Abby, when I edited the Cloak and Dagger Club with her at the end of last year was that she wanted it to be more clear in regards to the timeline and what everybody's alibis were. So as I'm working on this first draft, I really want to keep that in mind just to potentially save myself some further editing down the road. So just like I did a few months ago when I was working on my edits for Abby, I'm going to use post-it notes to plot this out and just visualize the timeline of the crimes and write down where was everybody at that time. Do you want to say hi to the vlog, Drizzle? The people love you, Drizzle. They think you're so cute. You want to say hi? No? She doesn't really like cameras. She doesn't like being photographed or videoed. She's very, very shy. Very beautiful, very shy. Well, that's the first one, and I accidentally touched it and smudged the ink on my fingers. One down, some more to go. How are the two most beautiful girls in the world? You're so cute. Yes. I went for a walk on the beach this morning, hence why my hair is kind of sticking up right now. But my plan is gonna get in the shower, and then this afternoon I'm going to continue working on this timeline and maybe write a bit more of Dagger 2. I started working on the timeline yesterday, and I think I might want to change one detail because I refer to the first murder victim in the part that I wrote as being last known to be alive around 11 a.m. And I actually think it would make more sense for the story if we moved it to noon. So I might move that back an hour to have her last be seen around noon. I think that would make a little bit more sense with the timeline. Obviously, you haven't read the first book in the series yet, but you do know that it centers around this group of crime writers known as the Cloak and Dagger Club. And in the first book, obviously the murder takes place within the club. And so the club themselves they're all suspects. They're all potentially guilty. And in this book, the club is not really suspects. And I did mention in book 1 that their club meetings take place from around noon to 2:30, something like that. And so I think moving that time down to noon, then therefore all of them have an alibi. They all were with each other. And so I think that kind of makes more sense just to resolve that plot thread. So gonna keep working on that timeline this afternoon, maybe go back over what I wrote already and shift things around a little bit. I also hope that you enjoyed that clip of the dolphins that I saw. That was so cool to see them today. My only other plan for the day is that tonight I'm actually going out to dinner at a nice restaurant to celebrate my book deal. I think it's very important to celebrate all your little wins and big accomplishments in the writing journey, because obviously it's very hard. So I think celebrating yourself really helps you stay sane throughout the highs and lows of querying, getting an agent, getting a book deal. To be honest, I think getting this book deal is the biggest accomplishment of my life so far, so I do think it deserves a little celebration. And I just got a new dress, so I think it'll be super fun to get a little dressed up and go out for a nice celebratory meal. It's almost 2:30 and I need to leave for dinner around 5. So I'm going to go back over what I've written so far and make sure that I have every character's whereabouts accounted for on my post-its. I don't know how much physical writing I'm going to get done today, but once I finish this timeline, I can definitely dive in and get back to the scene I was in the middle of. So maybe tomorrow. I'm going to do some writing sprints. One of the hardest things for me during a first draft is to not put so much pressure on myself, because obviously the first draft is not going to be perfect. It doesn't even need to be good. Your first draft can be an utter piece of trash. You just need somewhere to start. And I don't think my first draft is an utter piece of trash, but I do struggle where I'll write something and I'll think to myself, oh, I don't think that was very good. And then later I'll go back and reread it and I'm like, you know what? That wasn't terrible. That was fine. And I think it's also a little bit harder this time because I'm just recently finished the edits with my editor on the Cloak and Dagger Club. And I think the Cloak and Dagger Club is great. I think it's so polished, so strong. So I think it's a little hard to go from that to a first draft, which is not trash, but not polished, not perfect. And I think that's something that I need to get over. So by doing some writing sprints, not only am I going to get the words down, but I'm going to be able to just focus on writing, not thinking, just let the words flow without obsessing over if they're good or not. I think I'm going to turn on one of Bethany Atazada's old writing sprints live streams. Those have been really helpful to me in the past, so I'm going to go to one of her old videos, use that, see if maybe I can write for an hour altogether, something like that, and we'll see how many words I get at the end. I watched most of one of Bethany Atazada's former live streams, but I think I'm going to call it quits here because it's now pushing 4:30 on a Sunday. I did one 10-minute sprint where I wrote 385 words, and then 3 15-minute sprints where I wrote 514 words, 479, and 549 respectively. And so if we add all of that up, that's 1,542, which I think is a decent writing day. I also finished the chapter that I was working on. I just finished the first draft of chapter 9, and I wrote one paragraph of chapter 10 just to give myself a place to start when I get back to this during my next writing session. I do think that writing sprints really work for me. They help me just write and not overanalyze what I'm doing as much. So I would say that was a decently successful day. I mean, I've definitely had days where I did sprints and I was much more in the zone, writing, sometimes 700, 800 words in one sprint, but I'm happy with this for now. Petersburg, Florida, and I checked my phone and I actually got an email from my editor saying that she's going to start working on some cover concepts for my book. So she asked me if I have any ideas. And yes, I do have ideas. So I'm going to sometime when I have the chance send her a little email and maybe some examples of book covers that I really like. It's obviously a super exciting time because, like, yes, I do want to talk about cover concepts. So I've gathered together some sample images for my editor. I'm going to send it to her in an email, but I just wanted to show you a couple of the things that I picked out and discuss what I said in the email. And my agent said the more detailed that you can be, the better. So I did try to give a good amount of information, though ultimately at the end of the day, it's up to the publisher what's on the cover. It's not up to me. They will hopefully take my feedback into account. And I'm very happy that they did ask me if I had any ideas. I do appreciate being asked because, you know, I know there are some people who their publishers don't even ask them. And so I'm really glad that they gave me the opportunity. Now, when you look at historical mystery covers, a lot of them have these designs with people on the covers. And in my uneducated opinion, I always kind of assumed that's just so that you can have connectivity between all the covers and they look like they belong to a series. And one thing that I said is I strongly prefer the covers that have illustrated people versus just photographs or stock images. Because sometimes with the stock images, I think they just don't go with the background and they can, frankly, sometimes look a little bit canned or cheap, in my opinion. So I put several images of historical mysteries that have illustrated covers with people on them just to show that this is more of my preference if that's the way they want to go. Another thing that I mentioned is since my book is set in 1930, I did think about possibly including some Art Deco elements on the cover. Now, I sent a lot of covers that are very, very Art Deco, and I don't know if I want to fully commit to that as a style. I'm sorry if you can hear the person who is doing work in the lawn next door. But I think maybe including a border or some kind of small details to reference the style of that era would be really cool. So I also sent some covers that give me that vintage 20s, 30s vibe. And I also sent the covers for A Most Agreeable Murder by Julia Seals. I'm so sorry about that. It's very distracting. A Dreadful Splendor by B.R. Myers and Pride and Premeditation by Tirzah Price. I don't know how you would describe this style of cover, but they all have this sort of like oval shape with little icons and details. I don't know what you would call it, but I think they look really nice. A Most Agreeable Murder in particular, I love this cover. I don't know what you would call this style, but I think they look really good, and it could be kind of fun to do a cover incorporating little tiny icons, I guess, that reference the book. I also did mention how much I love the redesigned marble covers by Holly Ovenden. That's the designer. And you know that I love these covers because I actually know who the designer is. This is literally the only book cover designer that I know by name. But I've said many times on my channel, I am obsessed with these. Not only do they look beautiful, but they all have hidden meanings because the plants, they're poisonous. Every single one has a clue from the mystery and a hidden silhouette of Miss Marple. So not only do they look cool, but they have a very cool story behind them. I don't know if this is going to be anything like my cover, but since I like them so much, I figured I would mention it. And since Abby, my agent, told me to be very detailed, I did think that I would mention some fonts that I like. To be completely transparent with you, I'm not even sure if these fonts would be the best choice for a cover, but I'm hoping that if I tell them that I like these fonts, maybe when they're actually doing the page layout for the book, they can maybe pick one of these fonts. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not a big deal, but I really like these more old style fonts. So I mentioned Garamond. Everybody loves Garamond, right? Saban, I don't know how to pronounce that. Caslin and Baskerville. You know, Baskerville could also be a really cool font because it makes me think about The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So that could be a kind of fun font to choose because of its name. So I think that I gave them a lot of information to work with. It was really fun to think about this and put all the covers together. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's my publisher's choice what the cover looks like, and I do trust their judgment. They obviously have access to more marketing and sales information than I do, but hopefully these ideas help them as they're coming up with different concepts. My understanding is that my editor is coming up with multiple different concepts, and then eventually at some point, you know, they're gonna have to hire a designer for the cover, and then once they have a basic sketch of the cover, they're gonna show it to me, and that'll be my chance to give feedback. Authors never have the final say on their covers, but I do think most publishers want their authors to like the covers. Hopefully, we'll get a really cool cover that everybody likes. It is now May 22nd, around 4:45, so almost the end of the workday, and I think tonight I'm gonna try to get back into my first draft. The last time I wrote anything for Dagger 2 was on the 14th, so I really need to remind myself where I was in the draft and get myself back into it again. I always have a really hard time psyching myself up to start writing or start editing, but once I get in a groove, I can really get in a groove and accomplish a lot. I have, let's see, 32,113 words currently. And I've really been struggling because I keep thinking that what I'm writing is not good. But then if I go back later and reread what I wrote, I find myself saying, oh, it's not that bad. But I think this is just part of the first draft process for me. I actually just now was listening to the very first writing vlog that I made when I started writing the Cloak and Dagger Club. In that vlog, I'm talking about how I feel like what I'm writing is bad and I'm trying to figure things out. And obviously in the end, that book, I think, I'm a little biased, but I think it came out amazing. So I think, you know, you just need to work through the first draft, accept that there's gonna be things that you're gonna figure out along the way. And, you know, maybe at first you're gonna be like, oh, is this working? Is this good? But eventually, through a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of thought, you can get it there. I was also talking in that vlog about how I felt like the beginning was such an info dump and I felt it read so awkwardly. And that's actually another thing that I'm struggling with right now, particularly because since this is a sequel, it has to do that thing sequels do, where you spoon feed the reader a little bit of vital information from the first book, just in case they didn't read it or they forgot what happened. And I feel like that always reads a little awkward. So I was trying to do that in the draft, wondering, well, how much do I include? Where do I put it? Oh, it sounds so info dumpy, but I feel like that's just, you know, something that happens whenever you read a sequel. There will always be that very brief, here's what you missed, you know, a sum up of the main points of the characters and their relationships. And it's always a little bit awkward. So all of this to say that rewatching that video from 2023 really reassured me that all of these first draft struggles are nothing new, and I will figure it out eventually. Right now, I'm just gonna keep writing and see what I can get done. Since I now have my contract and everything's official, I'm going to start working harder and really devoting a lot of time to getting this draft done. I'm also hoping that when I finish draft 1, I will still have enough time to take a little bit of a break before starting draft 2. So currently my publisher has set a due date for the Dagger 2 manuscript of, I believe, April 1st. So that is obviously about 10 months away, and 10 months is a lot of time. So in that time, I want to finish the first draft, do draft 2 on my own. I'm going to have my mom be the first person who reads my draft because she has been my alpha reader for all the books that I've written. And she was so cute. She said to me, am I still gonna be your alpha reader? And I was like, of course, Mom, you can still be my alpha reader. Then make any edits I have to make based on her comments. I'm assuming after that I will probably send it to my agent. My agent is editorial, and she did ask me, you know, do you want me to give you editorial feedback on this book when you write it, or do you just want to go straight to your editor? And I said, yes, I do really want your input because I think her input is very valuable. She really did have astute comments about the Cloak and Dagger Club when we worked on it together. So I'm assuming that that would be about the time that I will send it to her. Obviously, I will clarify with her timeline and what draft she usually likes to read. From my perspective, though, I don't see any benefit to sending her the very first draft because obviously the first draft always has problems. And so I think it would be a waste of time to send her something and have her tell me what's wrong with it when like I already know what's wrong with it. Like I think I should send her a draft that I feel pretty good about so that when she does give me editorial comments, I can be like, oh, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. And therefore we're not just wasting our time telling me things I already know. And then once we've worked this out, got the book into a decent shape, I'm gonna then send it to my editor. Obviously, at the point when it goes to the editor, it still doesn't need to be perfect because the editor is going to have comments. But obviously, I wanna send something ideally that I feel pretty good about, even if I don't think it's 100% perfect. So in the next 10-ish months, I'm going to be doing all of those things. I do think it would be nice to take a break of 2 weeks to a month in between drafts 1 and 2. That way, when I actually go back and reread what I wrote, I can do it with a fresh perspective and a bit of emotional distance. I have heard people say that a month or even more is really preferable. However, in the past, I have tried to take a 1-month break from manuscript and I never was actually able to do it. I would always get too impatient and I would last about 2 weeks on a break before I had to get back to the manuscript. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to do a break of 2 weeks to a month, but we just gotta see how it goes, if I have enough time, and if I'm feeling patient. So I wrote a little over 1,900 words yesterday and 500 something more this morning. The scene that I started today, I think, is going to be quite fun. I initially wasn't sure if I wanted to set this scene at like a real 1930s London location or if I wanted to make a place up because I did identify a popular restaurant from that time period that the scene could take place in. But I was having a hard time finding descriptions of what the interior of the restaurant would have looked like in 1931. So what I ended up deciding to do is just create like a unnamed fictional place, but use the descriptions of real places to help me describe it. And I'm gonna continue working on that this afternoon, hopefully. But I need to go run some errands this afternoon. And actually, one of the things I need to do is go to the bank because yesterday I got my check from my agent, and this is actually the first 3 payments from my book deal because I got the payments for signing the contract, book 1 being accepted by the publisher, and getting the outline approved for book 2. And this is going to be all the money that I'm going to get probably for quite some time because my other 3 payments are for the acceptance of book 2, book 1 coming out, book 2 coming out. So obviously, 2 of those things are going to happen next year, and then the final payment will be presumably in 2027. I'm going to go to the bank because I think a check for this amount, you don't just do mobile deposit. Does this look good, IDK? I don't really have a shade of red that matches this shirt. Maybe this instead. So that's my plan. And I do want to get as much work done on the book as I can in the next couple weeks because I will actually be going out of the country for a trip very soon. And I know that when I'm out of the country, I'm going to be busy and probably not writing. So I won't be making progress then. And I might have to go through this whole thing again about when I get back from the trip, psyching myself back up to continue writing. So let's just try to get as far as we can now, just in case. I like red lipstick, but I hate putting it on because I always feel like I look like a clown. Maybe I need to get like a red lip liner. Maybe that would help me. But going to the bank, going to run some other errands, and we'll resume working on this scene this afternoon. I do think it's going to be a really fun scene with a lot of the characters in it, so hopefully I can get a lot done. Hey babes, are you gonna get some work done? Ooh. Meow. So this here is what I got done in the past 4 days. That's, I think, over 8,000 words. So that's really good. I had a really good writing weekend this weekend. It was a long weekend and I wanted to get a lot done. I did. And now this week, I do have some things that I want to do. One thing that I think would be helpful to do this week is to go over everything that I wrote so far and make a list of what the characters know at this point, what clues they have at this point. Because obviously, whenever I write my mysteries, I am coming from the perspective of the author, the person who knows what the solution is and where all the clues are and what they mean. So I think right now it's hard to remember what it is my characters know and what pieces of information they have right now. So I think going back over what I wrote and writing down all the information that I've given them in the universe would be helpful because then I can get more so into the mindset of the characters. I have a scene coming up in the outline where basically they're going to be talking together about this investigation, what they know so far, their interpretations, who they think is guilty, who looks like they have an alibi, and things like that. So I really want to, before I write that scene, make sure that I am in the characters' heads and understanding where they are coming from. I've been working on this scene. I think it's a really fun sequence. And originally I outlined it as one chapter, but now it is actually 3 chapters. And something that I realized this evening, like less than an hour ago, is that the last part that I started writing yesterday, I just wrote a few paragraphs of it. I actually don't know if that part needs to be in the book at all. It would be a fun character developing scene. However, I don't think it's strictly speaking necessary because it furthers the relationship of these two characters, but doesn't necessarily further the plot. At least at this point, I don't think it does. So I'm not going to delete the little parts that I did write, but I'm going to leave a note for myself in the draft. So when I circle back for draft 2, I can figure out what I want to do. I think if somehow I could come up with a way to combine this character building moment with a plot furthering moment and just merge that together into one scene, then it would be a good thing to keep in because it would serve multiple purposes. But if I can't think of a way to do that, then I think I'll just delete that part because even though it could be a fun interaction, it's not going to further the larger mystery and the larger storyline. But rather than delete the things that I wrote, I'm just going to leave a note for myself in the draft so later I can decide whether I want to delete that, rework it, or something else. Another thing that I need to figure out, but I think this is going to be more so a problem for the draft 2 version of me, is what mixed media elements I want to incorporate in this book. I mentioned in the past that the Cloak and Dagger Club, which is now going to be my debut novel, it has mixed media elements. Since all of the characters are authors themselves, the Cloak and Dagger Club has very brief excerpts from the books written by the different club members, as well as a couple of newspaper articles. So far in this draft, there is a newspaper article, and I want to incorporate book within a book elements once again. However, at this point, I have no idea what those elements are going to be. They need to serve a purpose because, like in the Cloak and Dagger Club, yes, the book within a book elements are fun, but they also all parallel things going on in the narrative at that time. They're strategically placed and they do serve a thematic purpose. Obviously, if I'm going to do the same thing, again, I want all of the excerpts that I include to actually parallel things going on in the narrative at that time. I haven't decided where they would go or what they would say. And so I think that's going to be something I worry about in draft 2 because at that point I will have written the entire book and I can maybe identify potential spots for them to go. Say, okay, this is a really important scene for such and such a character, so let's put a scene from their book that parallels this and things like that. But that's going to be a problem for future me. Future me is going to figure it out. Current me is just going to get through draft one. I am going to be going to Europe in 3 weeks. So let's see how much I can get done before this trip. I don't know if I can finish draft one. I think that might be asking too much. But if I could get... I was gonna say if I could get to 50,000 words, but actually I really only need to write 10,000 more words to get to 50. But let's just say get to 50. If I could bare minimum get to 50,000 words, I think that would be a great way to end this vlog and go on my vacation with some decent progress made. And anything over the 50,000 words will just be a bonus. It is now June and I am 45,000 words into my manuscript. I started working on this first draft, I think back in March while I was waiting for my contract, late March. So that's how long I've been working on it. Obviously, I wasn't working that hard at first because technically I wasn't even supposed to be writing it, but I got a lot done this week. I wrote 6 out of 7 days and added 9,000 words. So you can see here in my notebook, this is what I got done in the past week. I was struggling at the beginning of the first draft. I was second guessing myself, wondering if everything that I wrote was terrible. But I actually went back over what I wrote, like I said, to make a list of things that my characters know at this point. And I do not think the first draft is terrible. Obviously, there are things that I want to change about it because it's the first draft, but it is objectively not terrible. And I think the fact that I wrote 9,000 words this week shows that I am now more immersed in the story. I feel like this frequently happens to me with a first draft, where at first I'm really having a hard time getting into it. I'm not sure if anything I'm doing is good. But then once I really get into it, I really get into a groove and I can accomplish a lot. I am trying not to edit too much during the first draft because I don't want to slow down my momentum, but I've started making a checklist of things that I want to think about in the next draft. I am having a hard time with self-editing. I think at this point, because I've been through edits with my agent and my editor, and I've written 2 books before, I am a little more cognizant of my strengths, my weaknesses, and the things that I need to keep in mind. So it is hard to shut that editor part of my brain off, but I'm just making a list so that I can remember all of these things for later. And I am allowing myself to do some minor editing. I just don't want to get too in the weeds with that at this point. Actually, today when I was in the car, I kind of had an epiphany because one of my characters, I was wondering if I was describing that character's emotional state effectively, if it was coming across, and I got an idea for something I could add to one of the earlier chapters to make that character's mindset clearer. So I think that was a really good idea. It just occurred to me while I was in the car today. Very soon I will be going on my trip to Croatia, and that means I will not be writing for about 2 weeks, other than maybe a little bit at the airport. So I may lose my momentum a little bit there, but if I can get to 50K by then, which I see no reason why I can't do that, that's only 5,000 more words, I think at least then I'll be in pretty good shape. So I'm going to try to get as much done as I can before then, and we'll see how it goes. I plan to continue this vlog until right before my trip, and then I'm going to sign off and we'll pick back up again afterward. It is now 3:30. I've been goofing off, scrolling through Instagram, so I'm going to try to get a little work done today, and we'll see how it goes. The only thing that's important to me. It is now 6. I wrote over 2,000 words today, 2 scenes, and I killed someone. In the book, of course, not in real life. It had to be done. It had to be done for the plot. I don't feel good about it, but they needed to die. Rest in peace. As I've been working on this draft, I've been wondering if it's going to end up being way too long because there were several chapters that I outlined as 1 chapter, but I actually had to break them up into 2 or even 3 chapters because I realized they were getting way too long to be 1 chapter. But I actually took a look at my most recent version of the Cloak and Dagger Club that's being sent to the copy editor, and my original outline, I outlined it as 20 chapters and epilogue, which is the exact same number of chapters that I put in this outline for book 2. Not intentionally, it just worked out that way. And oh yikes, I think everything's okay though. I can't break another microphone. I just broke the last one. Oh goodness. But so I outlined them both to be the exact same number of chapters, but the Cloak and Dagger Club, once we broke some of the chapters up in the editing process, it's actually 30 chapters and an epilogue. So the fact that chapter 18 was originally supposed to be chapter 12, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think it'll probably be a similar word count in the end if I continue on like this. Guys, there it is. 50,000 and counting. Yay. Isn't this great, Drizzle? Look, I got my 50,000 words. Aren't you proud of me? Aren't you proud of me, sweetie? It is now Wednesday, and I am leaving on Friday for my trip. Still have to pack and stuff. So I didn't get a huge amount of writing done this week. I will put on the screen in editing what my current word count is, and I'm going to wrap up the vlog here. I do have 2 travel days though on my way to Croatia, so I might film a vlog to see how much I can get written on my layover. Let me know in the comment section if you would like to see that. Actually, wait, no, because this is going to be posted so far in the future that you can't possibly influence what I'm going to do. I'm being dumb, I'm sorry. I do feel like with this draft, I am in a good place. And I think we've really reached a point in the book where things are really happening and we're in the home stretch of the story, so to speak. Now, I definitely am going to have to work out some things in future drafts, but I think I've hit a nice groove with draft 1, and I'm feeling a little bit more self-assured. I do think it is a little bit hard to go from reading over the polished final draft that you've worked on with an editor and a literary agent to go back to doing draft 1, where obviously you're just working out all the kinks and it's, you know, the rawest form that it's going to be. It is a little jarring to go from perfectly polished, ready to go to copy edits to first draft nonsense. So that was a hurdle that I had to get over, but I feel like we're in a good place now with drafting, and I'm definitely really making great progress for my writing schedule. Subscribe if you want to see my next writing vlog, and please, if you're enjoying this, please like, comment, and subscribe. You engaging with my videos helps me so much as a creator. So even if you can't think of anything to comment, if you want to show your support for me, why don't you drop a airplane emoji in the comment section? It really would mean a lot to me and help my video. Thank you so much for being here, and if you want to watch another one of my videos, why don't you watch this one where I wrote in 7 different places for 7 days. Thank you so much for being here today. I love and appreciate you all, and I will see you next time.